The regular meeting of the Town of Superior Planning Commission will come to order. Commissioner Harden, could we have the roll call, please?
Sure. Chairperson Jim Sawtelle.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Robert Momartz.
Here.
Commissioners Phyllis Harden here. Mark Laces, Jerry Amalia.
Here.
Jason Reese.
Here.
Tom Ricker, Anthony Stewart.
Present.
Planner Fred Fox. Attorney Hillary Graham. And Associate Planner Stephen Williams.
Here.
You're here.
All right, thanks. First item is approval of the agenda. Has everybody received the agenda? We have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Momar, second. Commissioner Reese, all those in favor? Yeah, motion's carried. Next item is public comment on the consent agenda or non-agenda items. Any members of the public wishing to make any comments? All right, hearing none. The next item is approval of the minutes of the May 17, 2016 meeting. Has everybody received a copy of the minutes? Anybody have any corrections or additions they wanted to make?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, Commissioner Stewart,
Second.
Commissioner Momar, all those in favor? The motion's carried. Okay, the next item is the public hearing and adoption of a resolution recommending approval of the major subdivision, final plats, and final development plans for Superior Town Center Lot 1, Blocks 13 and 25. The public hearing is opened. Is there proof of publication?
Yes, I have proof.
Does the staff have a presentation they'd like to make?
I do, a short one, hopefully. It's actually a pretty dense application. Stephen Williams, town staff, sorry. So I'm going to get through it as quickly as I can, as efficiently as I can, but if questions arise or if there's any confusion about anything, feel free to interrupt me, and we'll go over it as we get through it. The applicant, RC Superior, requests approval of 2 major subdivision plats and 2 final development plans for Lot 1, Block 13, and Lot 1, Block 25 of the Superior Town Center. The subdivision requests are required to divide each block into developable lots and defined outlots, and the FDP requests are required to develop each of these subdivided areas as follows. On Block 13, the applicant is requesting to create 92 developable lots and 13 outlots. On Block 25, RC Superior is requesting to create 25 developable lots, 7 outlots, and 1 super lot. As clarified in the project narrative, these final development plan requests to develop these lots include 3 different product types, and examples of each of those product types are illustrated on the slide here. Block 13 and Block 25 are located within the Superior Town Center, Planning Area 3, as indicated here. And then their location within the overall Town Center is a little bit better illustrated by this land use diagram. Those 2 lots outlined in red fall just south of Old Railway, and they're also flanking Promenade Drive, which is one of the primary arterials that connects Planning Area 2 with Planning Area 3 to the south. The plan also illustrates that Planning Area 2 is intended to serve as a commercial core of the town center with flex zoning that allows for a dense mix of commercial and residential uses, and Planning Area 3 is primarily intended to develop residentially as indicated by the yellow coloring, with some flex space is allowed within Planning Area 3 as well. A mix of 3 different housing types and builders, again, is proposed for these 2 blocks. The 2 major subdivision plats are generally illustrated here. Block 25 on the left and Block 13 is on the right. The reason for the individual plat requests stems from the fact that the 2 blocks in questions are affiliated with different plats currently. Block 25 was replatted as part of the joint Discovery Office Park Superior Town Center replat. This replat occurred in May of 2015 to allow Discovery Office or Discovery Parkway to connect with the town center. Block 13 remains part of the Superior Town Center. Filing 1B replat. As illustrated, the applicant is proposing to plat and develop all of Block 13, which is shown over here, and a portion of Block 25, which is just the western boundary of Promenade. In total, 117 residentially developable lots would be created by this proposal. The subdivision request for Block 13 is illustrated here. It would divide this 4.1 acre block into 92 developable lots comprising 2.31 acres and 13 outlots comprising 1.79 acres. This request would yield a density of 22 dwelling units per acre. Lot sizes would range from 720 square feet to 1,924 square feet. As configured, 48 lots shown in gray would be internal to the property, and 44 exterior lots shown in tan would line the surrounding public streets. Old Railway exists to the north, Superior Drive exists to the east over here, Village Greenway exists to the south, and then this is that Promenade Way or Promenade Drive that I mentioned earlier. The associated FDP sheets clarify that the 44 exterior lots are designed to face the adjacent public streets. So all these parcels shown in tan would face outward and have rear-loaded garages that front the internal drive. So this internal drive is defined as Outlot M and is encircled by this blue line. The internal lots, in contrast, shown in gray, would face inward towards Outlot A and Outlot B. This arrangement would afford direct access, garage access to all the proposed units and the internal drives contained within Outlot M, which is outlined in blue. This design also creates an environment in which the internal drives function as alleys where garages face garages. It allows the more visible units along the exterior of Block 13 to face the public streets, creating a consistent streetscape that is not interrupted by private driveways. The internal units within Block 13 face shared open spaces that are planned for outlots A and B. Those areas will be landscaped, and we'll get into those details later. If Planning Commission and the Town Board are supportive of this general concept and want to avoid instances in which residential lots face garage doors, staff recommends that a note be added to the plat sheet for Block 25, so that we'll get into here in a second, but those are for these parcels around here because only the frontage of Promenade Drive is proposed now. So if we want to add a condition to this plat that clarifies that we don't want these houses facing these garage doors, that we want this alley to serve as an access alley for garages, which I assume is going to be the intent, but that would kind of ensure that that is what happens and we have that kind of development pattern moving forward if we were to add that plat note to the subdivision plat for Block 25. At just over an acre, Outlot M, shown in blue, is the largest of the 13 proposed outlots. It is the only outlot proposed to encompass the internal drives. These drive lanes would be privately owned and maintained and used to house several of the utilities that are also needed for this development. The street section here on the bottom left shows all the utilities that are proposed to be underground. It also shows the general spacing and configuration of this internal drive. As proposed, this design is shy of the town standards for street widths. 26 feet is proposed and 30 are required. And for utility easements, it's also shy of the recommended separation for having water and sewer lines within an easement. 32 feet is proposed and 37 is required. Consequently, the town will not accept these as public. They'll remain private. The applicant has included a separate diagram within the FDP sheets. It's not included in this presentation, but we can go over if anybody has any questions about it. But it basically clarifies how fire access standards will be met. And the fire district, Rocky Mountain Fire, has reviewed this proposal and related no concerns through their referral. They did clarify that the streets will need to be paved and hydrants will need to be installed before construction-related materials are delivered for development. The other 12 outlots within Block 13 are shown in green. They basically lie around the perimeter and offer places for walkways, additional landscaped areas, and general connectivity throughout the site. And these outlots also serve for drainage and utility easements as well. The subdivision request as it relates to Block 25 is shown here. It would divide this 6.3 acre block into 25 developable lots comprising 0.61 acres for those developable lots, and the outlots would comprise 0.75 acres. The one super lot is shown in yellow. It's 4.7 acres in size. This request over the developable area would yield a density of 18 dwelling units an acre. Lot sizes would range from 913 square feet to 1,357 square feet, all of which, again, would line the west side of Promenade Drive. Like the east side of Promenade Drive, development within Block 13 would feature clusters of development blocks oriented towards the public streets that are separated by landscaped outlots that are shown in green here, and vehicle access would be on this private drive lane, which has the same cross-section as you saw in the previous slides. The final development plan sheets clarify the overall development proposal for these two blocks. Many of the FDP sheets have been organized into an overall site plan and then separated by match lines that show you closer up. So this is actually section 1, this is section 2, and this is section 3 as you go through those sheets. Staff has worked with the applicant to get this to be consistent so that it's easy to follow. This format, the site plan, the landscape plans, drainage, and utility plans all follow the same organization system. This context map was included to illustrate how these two blocks would connect and relate with the immediately adjacent parcels within the town center. The purple dashed lines that are a little bit faint show the ADA connectivity, and also if there's ADA connectivity, there's also pedestrian connectivity. But this is intended to illustrate that there's 3 lots in here that are ADA accessible, 3 parcels in here that are also ADA accessible, and this shows those routes. Essentially, these folks can head out to the west and connect with Promenade Drive and link into the system that is proposed and planned and already approved through separate FDP processes for the streets. So FDP 1 Phase 2 in particular is what approved the streets in this section of town, the Promenade Drive, Village Greenway, and Superior Drive connections. And I think Old Railway is actually part of FDP 1 Phase 1, which was associated with Main Street. The site plan sheets break down which development type is proposed where. So this is where we get into those 3 different developments. The blocks shaded in gray are proposed to be developed, and in my mind this is gray, it's a little brown. This is proposed to be developed by Wonderland Homes. The internal sites shown in tan are developed by Remington, and then the ones shown in blue along Superior Drive and Village Greenway would be developed by Davidson Communities. The 103 Wonderland and Remington homes would be developed as attached townhome type units, and the 14 Davidson lots would be single-family detached residences. As illustrated, Wonderland would line each side of Promenade Drive as well as the south side of Old Railway. I guess we got into the rest of it already. Tables on the FDP cover sheet and the site plan clarify the types of units that are proposed as well as the overall parking plan. So I want to get through all of these tables here real quick. In summary, 88 2-bedroom units, 15 3-bedroom units, and 14 4-bedroom units are proposed. Parking space requirements for residential units are dependent upon the number of bedrooms proposed. So 2-bedroom units require 1.5 spaces, 3-bedroom units require 2 spaces, and 4-bedroom units require 3 spaces per the Superior Town Center plan development. The applicant is proposing 208 parking spaces for Block 13, where 174 are required, and they're proposing 53 spaces for Block 25, where 43 are required. A few distinct exceptions, however, are also being requested. The applicant will be providing 2 garage spaces for each residence. So none of the garages have associated driveways. You basically just pull into the garage. So private parking is limited to garage bays. Consequently, the applicant is requesting to overpark their 2-bedroom units and underpark their 4-bedroom units. To address this unit shortcoming of 14 spaces for the 4-bedroom dwellings and their need to provide 10 additional guest parking spaces, the applicant is proposing to utilize some of the on-street parking spaces that have been approved on adjacent streets. In total, 89 parking spaces exist basically fronting these lots, so on each side of Promenade Drive, the north side of Old Railway, along Superior Drive, and along Village Greenway. Of those 89 parking spaces, they're proposing to use 24 of them to meet these two requirements. Planning Commission and the town will need to consider whether using on-street parking spaces to serve these needs is acceptable and whether spaces should be formally signed and reserved on these on-street spaces in an otherwise residential area. So staff's general opinion is we have 90 spaces that's basically dedicated to residential uses one way or the other, and whether or not we want to formally sign the 24 required, that's kind of more of the question. I think that there's ample parking out there. Should this request be something that you guys are willing to consider? Separate site plan sheets have been provided for each development type to clarify the details of each project. These ones have been required or have been provided by Wonderland Homes, which would construct 15 residential building complexes in configurations of between 3 and 5 units for a total of 55 townhome units. Each of these units would be sited on individual building lots. 7 of these townhome complexes are within blocked, with a total of 7 of these townhome complexes, a total of 25 individual townhomes, are located on the west side of Promenade Drive, and the remaining 8 townhome complexes and 30 individual units are located within Block 13. This site plan sheet illustrates, or includes 2 tables, a building type information table, which you can't read, but it clarifies the sizes, dimensions, and groups of the units and complexes. There are 4 different townhome unit types within the Wonderland Home site, and 2 variations of the 3-unit complexes. Each unit has 3 full stories and a partial 4th story, which includes access to a rooftop deck. The units range in size from 1,840 square feet to 2,498. Each townhome building is proposed to be 49 feet 3 inches tall, which is less than the 55-foot height maximum that's permitted for this development block. The typical setback condition insert here on the bottom right shows the setback conditions Wonderland is proposing. As illustrated, this product type will be between, the lots will be between 20 and 25 feet wide and roughly 38 feet deep. The front setback would range from 2.5 feet to 4 feet. Sides that are shared would be 0. Sides on corners would be 5 feet, and rear setbacks would be 3 feet as proposed. Examples of 2 of the clustered townhome buildings are shown here, and on the following slide. The proposed design of the building corresponds with the residential townhome designation within the town center guidelines. These guidelines envision townhomes between 1,200 square feet and 2,500 square feet, and this project falls within that range. The guidelines also clarify that these homes should create a strong building presence along the street and provide a transition from the more urban building products of the town core. As this product is proposed to abut the town core and falls within the size limitations, staff considers it to meet the intent of these standards. Such other standards as front porches, alley access garages are also met. Lining both sides of Promenade Drive with a consistent residential product will also help define this area and also signal the transition from the town center to a more residential environment. Each of these buildings is 4 stories tall, includes a mix of brick, stone, and lap siding, as well as hardy panels and asphalt shingle roofs. The buildings are designed, as I said, at 49.3 at their tallest, but drop down to 3 stories for the majority of the front elevations. As you can see here and here, the rooftop fourth floor component is generally set back from the front. Accent details include metal handrails, balcony railings, and awnings above select windows. Each unit type has a rooftop deck that's accessed from the 4th floor of the building. The front elevations of each building type is defined by prominent brick end caps. So you can see the brick is used from floor to ceiling on the 3rd floors for all of the end caps and even in some interiors. This helps create vertical bay spacing and the appearance of individual row houses, thereby complying with the massing and scales called for in the town center design guidelines. This design also includes a variety of pitched and gabled and shed roofs, flat roof sections, which help break up the roof line to avoid the appearance of large continuous building forms. Each townhome unit includes a front main entrance door that is slightly elevated above the street. They all have some step step-ups, and some of the doors actually don't front the street. You got to go up the steps and turn to the left or turn to the right to get in. So there's a lot of just different distinct building variation among each of the units. There are 4 color schemes proposed, and the materials boards are kind of placed everywhere throughout the room. You can look at those in closer detail if you like. Each color scheme includes shingle and flashing specification, 4 main colors, a trim color, an accent color, and brick and limestone specifications. Variation between the color schemes occurs in the body of the building as well. This individual site plan clarifies where the Remington homes will be placed within Block 13. These are the residential products that will be sited internal to Block 13. This proposal includes 8 building complexes, each containing between 3 and 8 units for a total of 48 individual townhomes. The table and typical setback illustrations included on this plan clarify that there are 3 different townhome units proposed, so there's 3 different floor plans essentially proposed within the Remington portion of the site, and all of the building, the variations between 3 and 8 units just have a different variety of those units, excuse me. The setback illustrations clarify that these units are 20 feet wide and range in depth between 33 and 45 feet. Each townhome unit is 3 stories with a maximum proposed height of 40 feet 2 inches. As clarified in the project narrative, Remington Townhomes corresponds with the Urban Via residential typology designation within the town center design guidelines, and this is where I think I had an error in my staff recommendation. I think I called it a townhome typology, and it is the Urban Via, or Urban Villa, excuse me, which envisions residences to be between 1,200 square feet and 1,900 square feet. They also define these as compact and can be located on shallow lots. Plan 30, the smallest townhome unit, is 1,276 square feet in size. Plan 38, the mid-size unit, is 1,634 square feet. And Plan 43, the largest unit, is 1,774 square feet. With the exception of a 3-foot rear setback, these units are all designed to be built onto their side and front property lines. Townhomes are, these units are designed to front one of 2 interior courtyards proposed within Block 13. This design will result in the interior lanes proposed for the site that we discussed earlier, where the garage faces face the garage faces of the buildings across the alley. Although the design guidelines did not envision this condition, staff understands the greater benefit of having the exterior residential products address the prominent streets within the town center. So these are the major streets on the outside. These are internal streets. Getting the kind of fabric and architectural statement for the main public streets takes precedence. So we're generally supportive of this exception as well. Examples of the front and rear elevations for Remington multifamily units are shown here. Although Remington is proposing 4 different floor plans, 5 elevations are also proposed. The front elevation of each townhome includes a mix of stucco, lap siding, brick columns, and asphalt shingle roofs. Stucco is the primary material on the ground level, and then it transitions to lap siding on the second level, where each unit has a porch with a metal railing. The primary difference between these elevations is the 3rd-story metal siding, and the window pattern and roof form kind of changes on these levels to give it a different articulation. The color scheme for the proposed buildings includes muted grays, blues, and greens on the upper levels and red brick at the base. The proposed roof forms include gable and shed roofs, which are coupled with materials and color changes in the buildings to help delineate breaks between the individual townhomes, which is something that's called for in the design guidelines. These 3 side elevations reflect the 3 units that are proposed to cap the building ends and clarify that 4-sided architecture will be achieved. These perspectives also illustrate the articulation on the front and rear of the facades that these 2 structures or 3 structures will incorporate. The Davidson Communities proportion of this site is located within Block 13 on the west side of Superior Drive and on the north side of Village Green Way. It includes 14 single-family detached homes that will front the park that's across the street on Track D and Village Green Drive, which also has a park here to the southwest. The development table clarifies that the tallest building height proposed for in this product is 46 feet 2 inches. Typical plotting exhibit illustrates that the lots are shown at 1,800 square feet and roughly 45 feet by 40 feet in dimension. The planned setbacks are 5 feet for the front, 3 feet for side, and 3 feet for rear. These plans range from 2,227 square feet for the smallest three-story option to 3,265 square feet for the largest four-story option. The proposed homes most closely match the villa residential type, which are defined in the design guidelines as compact residential buildings that can be located on shallow lots with parking provided at the alley in the form of private garages. The PD and design guideline standards, however, stipulate that unit sizes for villas range between 1,500 square feet and 2,400 square feet. These units exceed the upper end of this range by 865 square feet. Staff understands that the unit size ranges within the established residential typologies were intended to ensure a mix of housing types and sizes. The largest unit within these defined typologies is 3,000 square feet, and it's dedicated to the cottage definition. As the proposed structure falls within the height requirements that govern this block, staff does not believe the plan development or the town board ever intended to limit residential sizes to being less than 3,000 square feet. So staff supports this request, but of course, planning commission and the town board will ultimately need to clarify whether or not the proposed sizes are supportable and whether or not an exception to this guideline is supportable in this instance. But again, it's within the height requirements that are allowed for Block 13. There are 3 floor plans proposed on the Davidson Communities portion of the site. Each of these floor plans also includes an optional 4th-story, shown here, for a total of 6 different floor plans and 6 different elevations. For each of these 6 elevations, there are 3 different color material finish options, so 18 different exterior color or facade appearances could occur amongst these 14 different sites. So they have more options than they actually have sites out here. But no side or rear elevations were actually included with this proposal. They are included with that 11 by 17 individual plan set, so it's just a correction that needs to be made so that we get all 4-sided architecture included with this review. Each of the proposed front elevations features an attractive mix of stone and brick that covers the bottom half of the front elevations, roughly a story and a half. Elevations transition to lap siding on the upper levels, roofs that are finished with asphalt shingle. Similar to the Wonderland Homes products, these designs include a variety of roof types and breaks to help break up the roof line and avoid the appearance of a large continuous building. And it also includes a porch that's elevated above grade, so you step up to the porch. Building fronts are also defined by a mix of prominent windows and balconies, and 4th-story options feature rooftop decks over half the frontage. So the 4th floor elevations do not span the entire front. And that's evident on these bottom slides. So this is the rooftop deck portion, and that's the 4th-story enclosed portion. 4-story plans range in height between 44 feet 11 inches and 46 feet 2 inches. As noted earlier, missing from this plan set but included with Exhibit B are the rear and side elevations that are illustrated here on this slide. The FDP needs to incorporate 4-sided building architecture for each residential product, so that was a requirement that staff's recommending. And then the elevations within this exhibit show that the stone and brick wrap around the building fronts and are visible on the side elevations but not prominent. Rear elevations are generally limited to a mix of 2 lap siding types and 1 or 2 building colors. Staff's recommending that more variety in both colors and materials for both the sides and rear elevations occur. At minimum, we're suggesting that 2 colors should be employed for each elevation, as well as a base wall of stone or brick building material. So that gets us through the typologies and the products proposed. We'll get through lighting and landscaping, and then we'll turn it over. But if anyone has any questions on anything so far, I'm happy to answer them. Keep going.
Anybody have any questions?
Not tired of my voice yet? Okay. The landscaping sheets collectively illustrate the types, sizes, and locations and care of the species proposed. The overall landscape plan is intended to provide a broad overview In addition to serving utilities and providing pedestrian paths, the designated outlots within Block 13 and Block 25 will also function as landscaped open spaces for public use. Outlots A and B are in the center of Block 13 and will feature additional seating areas, kind of shown here and here. These are the largest of the proposed landscaped outlots. This plan sheet also illustrates different paving finishes. So paving patterns and colors are proposed within the lanes that are proposed in these locations. These distinct paving treatments, which are colored and pattern finish, as well as some precast pavers that are proposed along certain porches here and here, are the two different concrete finishes. Otherwise, the interior lanes are also proposed to be finished in concrete. But the intent of these colored patterns are to help distinguish pedestrian and vehicle areas where paths cross. To that end, staff's recommending that some additional pattern and colored concrete be proposed here, where this trail just kind of tees into an otherwise vehicular-only lane, and then also in this location here, so folks can kind of get up to the sidewalk in this northeastern corner. The mail delivery program has also been included with this sheet. In general, these bubbles clarify which mailboxes will be associated with which units. These partial plan sheets more clearly illustrate the landscaping and streetscaping proposed. The overarching goals of the design guidelines clarify that plant choices shall be attractive and sustainable, that material choices shall support a vibrant and public environment, and that plans establish clear circulation patterns for both pedestrians and vehicles. In these respects, staff finds the proposed plans to be in general conformance. Staff also finds the plans provide an appropriate mix of both species and uses, with some outlots featuring dense plantings and others featuring more usable open spaces. Both parks staff, as well as the town landscaping consultant, have also reviewed these plans, as well as the request by the applicant for using additional species within this development. And they find the proposal to meet the intent of the adopted regulations. The proposed plant list clarifies that the quantity and size at installation of each of the proposed species. This list also, in conjunction with the two tables included within the FDP landscape sheets, clarify that 3 exceptions to typical density standards, however, are being requested. 2 of these requests concern the number of shrubs relative to acreage of block 13 and 25, and the third relates to the percentage of evergreen shrubs proposed. They're proposing 25, the requirement's 33%. On block 13, 320 shrubs are required and 240 are proposed. On block 25, 72 shrubs are required and 53 are proposed. The asterisk at the bottom of the second table notes that the 486 ornamental grasses are not part. The 486 ornamental grasses that are proposed are not included in these calculations. The table also clarifies the number of deciduous trees proposed, which is 69, exceed the block planting requirements of 34 total. So in general, they're planting plenty of materials. It's just a different ratio of things. And as stated earlier, staff supportive of the overall planting densities and the choices and the mix of spaces that they're creating out here. The overall site lighting plan on the left provides a comprehensive overview of the proposed lighting locations within Block 13 and 25 and clarifies various types and fixtures proposed, as well as the illuminance calculations that are associated with the luminaire schedule and the illuminance calculation summary tables. The partial lighting plan illustrates the partial lighting plans on the right illustrate a little bit more clearly what fixtures are proposed in which locations and clarify the foot candle readings that would result for the lots associated with Wonderland and Remington homes. Wall-mounted lights are shown on both the front and the backs of homes. For the Davidson lots, only wall-mounted fixtures are shown on the backs of homes abutting the internal drives. These plan sheets clarify that 6 streetlights are proposed internal to Block 13 to help illuminate drive aisles, and that 41 bollard lights are also proposed to help illuminate pedestrian pathways, and that 10 additional landscape lights are proposed within outlots A and B for accent lighting. The narrative also clarifies that pedestrian scale light poles have been included, so the ones that have been placed within Block 13 are included to ensure pedestrian vehicle conflict doesn't occur and that there's adequate lighting for safety. Towards this end, staff is recommending that 2 additional lights be proposed in areas where there's fairly low readings. Out here for lighting, it's kind of a difficult balance because you're trying to balance safety with the fact that this is an entirely residential area. So we're shooting for even distribution of light at a low level so that it's not impacting residences. The other kind of unusual fact, I guess, for the lighting out here is that a lot of the wall-mounted fixtures on the garages are being used to illuminate the street. So the applicant needs to come back and clarify how we're going to guarantee that those lights be on when they need to be on in order to provide that illumination. So that's one of the conditions of the approval. In conclusion, staff has reviewed this submittal. These are the spec sheets. You can kind of see the lights. Sorry, I didn't mean to skip over this. But the lights proposed, one of the other staff recommendations was that these color fixtures match. But overall, and that they actually clarify which structures are going to be. So this is the wall pack for the garages. That part's clear. They show 2 different porch lights, and they don't clarify which user is going to incorporate which light, so we need to have some clarification here. These are the landscape details. This shows the type of cobble mulch that is proposed, rock cobble mulch, and this is the drainage swells, and then these are those 2 patterned concrete that we discussed earlier. One of the other conditions is just to kind of confirm what type of material these movable seats will be made out of so that we can confirm that they comply with design guideline standards for being relatively easily maintained. So this is where I was getting to a second ago. In conclusion, staff has reviewed the submittal for compliance with both major subdivision FDP requirements, both major subdivision requirements and FDP requirements, and finds the proposal to be in compliance with the applicable criteria. Staff has highlighted a number of exceptions that the applicant was requesting throughout the course of this presentation and noted a number of technical corrections to the application materials that need to be made through our staff memo. As conditions, staff recommends that PC find this proposal to be in compliance with the PD and recommend to the town board their approval. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Stephen. Anybody have any questions?
So I have, and this may be more for the developer, but on the square footage for the Davidson structures, the overage, that doesn't even include the potential for basements, right? I read in there that there's potential for basements in those
That's
units.
correct, and that's a good catch, but the residential typologies say that those ranges don't account for basement floor area, so it's really just intended to be above ground floor area analysis.
The question about the the variance, I guess, it's being requested on the size of the streets, the width of the streets.
Uh-huh.
Can you go over that again? You said the town code requires 37 feet?
So for public streets, we require a certain width, and it's a conversation we've had with the applicant as far as whether or not the town would be willing to take them and as public and maintain them, and the answer was no, and so that's part of the reason why, is that the width doesn't meet our public road standard of 30 feet. It's proposed at 26 feet, and so I guess the point of staff's mentioning that is just to, for everyone to be aware that that's why we haven't taken them as public. The other thing, is in relation to the fire access standards, and they have a separate illustration, and I think I might have it in this further down in our, if you want to get into it, but they've basically shown that a 6x4, and I believe that's wheel and axle rather than 6 feet by 4 feet, fire truck can get into all of these lanes and have the adequate turning radius. So that's one of our major concerns. But the other thing is just maintenance. So at that width, it's more difficult to maintain. The applicant has shown where they'll, plow and place snow. when they're maintaining the road. But it's more of a clarification on, we're not maintaining these internal drives.
Okay, so you're not talking about, for example, Promenade Street? You're
No,
talking
no,
about
we're
the
talking,
internal
I'm sorry,
alleys.
so we're just talking about so everything within Block 25, which is basically
Right,
south and west of here, and everything within Block 13 is a
Right.
part of this application.
okay,
All the public right-of-ways that front these blocks have been done through separate final development plans. And in this particular one, it's mostly final development plan 1, phase 2 for this right-of-way.
okay,
And those meet standards. It's these internal drives that we're talking about.
right, okay, thanks.
Sorry about that.
Anyone else?
I had a question about visitor parking, particularly on the Remington, which is all internal. What do the numbers show on that?
There's 3 parking spaces shown within this northern kind of block or configuration of townhomes. The other ones would rely on off-street parking on the public streets.
And can you tell me how many units it is and how many street parking slots would be available in theory?
There are 48 units. I would have to go into detail, go back to the page that actually shows how many bedrooms are proposed within each of these units. But the guest parking ratio, it was kind of done aggregately, so extracting that out, I may not be able to accomplish too quickly. I don't know if the applicant can clarify or not.
Good evening, Bill Jenks, RC Superior. I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for taking the time to consider this, and thank you to Stephen for the excellent report. We're going to rely on Stephen's graphics. We've also got people here from Remington Homes, Wonderland Homes, and their architect and our landscape architect. In case you have questions, we can try to field those. Same thing for the bedroom count. I wouldn't be able to tell you, but in general, there's 48 units there. And how many public parking spaces are there on the street? 82, I think.
How many for this block?
Yeah, on the on.
Altogether, there's 89, and
89. Yeah.
and they're only using 24 of them. But I
So
couldn't
there's-
tell you which ones, how
So-
many they need in here. I think they need more than 3. So they
So-
probably
so
rely
in general, but in general, the intent is for guests to park on Promenade or Old Rail or the surrounding public streets, which there are 89 spaces available for roughly 48 units in the Remington lot, or 92 units overall in the entire block,
Okay, thank
which
you.
we feel is pretty.
And you can kind of, get some feel of the breakdown here. The majority of units within Block 13, it's 68 shown, are 2-bedroom units. There are 10 3-bedroom units and 14 4-bedroom units. So most of the units only require a space and a half. If anyone had half a car, they could park within the garage. That's just not how it works out. But they are overparked technically, and that's what the kind of the complicated thing about these ratios are. They're providing more parking for the private use than they're required to, and providing less guest parking. So,
Other questions?
Yeah, since we're on the topic of parking and off-street parking and internal parking, what's the percentage of those spaces that have been dedicated for accessible or handicap usage?
the percentage is whatever. It's less than 5. It's 6 units out of 117 for the entire development, if that's the question you're asking.
For parking, there's actually no ADA parking like you would have for a commercial facility. All of the garages are, if you have an accessible unit, your garage is your accessible parking. The streets are standard parking spaces that, and could be used by a handicapped person, but there's no striped or blue or signed ADA parking spaces.
So nothing dedicated for guests that would come and visit, per se?
Not specifically for ADA. Again, street parking and, we do have accessible routes of travel from the street parking spaces to the accessible units. So that someone in a wheelchair can get out of their car that's parked on the street and make their way to a unit without having to go through stairs or anything like that. But there's no requirement for the blue stripe spaces.
Thank you. And I also had a question about the utility easement. That issue kind of came up, and I just wanted to touch on that to find out where we were with that. If the developer or the builder is going to be asking for a variance in that, and how is that related to the width of the private streets and the internal streets?
It's not a variance request, as I understand it. It's just a certain standard that we generally request we get, and that really is just to be able to provide for excavation space. So the separation between utilities, that's met. It's 10 feet between the water and sewer lines within those lanes. And then they have 32 feet of the 37 feet that's recommended. What would likely, I mean, you can still get to those lines. I think 37 feet's most likely required because it allows for easier, if you were to excavate one line, you'd probably still have a full transportation lane that would get you through on the other side. If they had to go in there and maintain that, they may not have all that space, but we're talking about 5 feet. So I couldn't speak definitively on that standard because it's a public works standard. So, but that's my general analysis or general understanding of that situation.
And then, is there a place in our packet that has staff recommendations for that, or is staff supportive of that difference?
The statement came from Public Works, and they just were kind of clarifying that it's a standard that's not being met, but they've reviewed the plans and are supportive of the proposal. So.
And then, real quick back to the Davidson project would be, we're looking at the Plan 3, the 4-story option, would be plus 865 square feet. And you said staff is fine with that, and they're not exceeding any width, or they're not looking for any variances, and it stays under the height restriction, right? So that's.
It's a guideline, and as I understand, I wasn't here when the original design guidelines were kind of established. And the residential typologies, I should clarify, are also part of the overarching PD. But I don't think that there's any limitation that it wasn't a design that we should have 3,000 or square foot less sizes of homes. It was just, that's how they defined them. And it was fairly clear through the recent PD approval that the board would consider changes or variances or exceptions to these standards through the FDP process, rather than trying to get their heads around what that might look like, at a PD level when we didn't have any detail of what this structure would look like. So it's an appropriate place to consider it if you guys are comfortable with it and staff's comfortable with it, because to my knowledge, there was no intent to have a 3,000 square foot floor area limitation above grade.
Thank you.
But to answer your question completely, I guess, is that there's no height variance or anything else, or lot size or anything like that changes. It's just floor area within the building.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have one other question. I don't know if this is the time to bring something like this up, but how will these, are there any guidelines in terms of how the buildings are wired for cable and communications and all that kind of stuff? In other words, I'm thinking if we're going to build a town center, we should have that as up to date as possible. Again, trying to create a superior product.
I don't know that there's any design guidelines or even building code guidelines that talk about the type of wireless communication or telecommunication facilities that are installed within a building. I do somewhat know that there's been plans and there's been a recent project. I don't know how far along they are. Bill might be able to speak more directly to it, but to actually route that those cables underneath McCaslin and get them to the town center, so they will have all the current type of facilities.
else?
I just got a quick comment for town staff. Very impressive presentation. This is greatly detailed, and your recommendations are fantastic. I appreciate all
Thank
the
you.
work you put into this. It's very detail-oriented.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I'd like to reiterate that myself. Very good job.
Well, this is a good time to mention Gavin, too, then. He's in the back there, and he's one of our consulting planners, and he helped me a lot on this application, so the credit goes to him as well.
Okay. Does the applicant wish to make any presentation?
You know, with the, sorry, Bill Jenks, RC Superior, with the detailed job that Stephen did here and all the discussion that's been had, we don't have any additional presentation, except for, did we get the two 3D views? Just so
I do
you
have
can
them,
see?
yeah. I don't have them in this.
We had a couple of, in the exhibit that was submitted outside of the FDP, we had a couple of 3D renderings that were completed. This shows you Promenade Drive looking south with the Wonderland product on either side. Kind of shows you the massing and the intent here. Again, the intent of this block is really to transition from the higher density town core, which is going to be all 4- and 5-story apartments and condos, down into the lower density blocks to the south. It'll be more cottages and the smaller or less dense product types. And I think this does a great job of doing that. I think Wonderland and their architect has done a really nice job responding to the design guidelines and creating that transition. And then if you go to the next one, this is a rendering of the Davidson homes. So you see the Central Park on the left. We'd basically be standing on the southwest corner of BVI, of the sports stable, looking down Superior Drive, with the northwest or northeast corner of Block 13 in the foreground there. And so it shows you the massing, similar massing to the Wonderland product, a little bit more variation in building types. Again, these are actually separated homes with a 6-foot setback between homes. So there's a little bit more variation in architecture and all looking over the park. And I think it, again, provides a nice transition from the downtown commercial core into the lower density stuff that'll be further south. So aside from that, you know, we have our consultants here ready to answer any questions. You know, personally, I've been working on this since January when I got involved with Ranch Capital and came onto the project in the first place. I know Heidi and Guillaume have been working with Ranch and RC Superior well before that. So it's been a long time in process, and we're excited to get started. Hopefully, if everything goes well with this and the town board approval later this month, we'd hope to be under construction on the horizontal improvements by probably middle of July or beginning of August. Hoping to start homes by September, and then we'd hope to have our first models open by, I think, the end of first quarter of 2017. So that's just a little time.
Great.
Thank you.
Before Bill sits down, the only thing that he may or Dave or somebody from Wonderland Homes may want to kind of comment on is we did spend a lot of time in this, and as Bill mentioned, this, I think the first conversation we had with Wonderland Homes was in September of this year, but there's been a lot of work going into the residential products here, and one of the unique aspects of both the Davidson Homes and the Wonderland Homes are the fourth floor patios and the residential space on the top level. And as I understood it, I think in September, this is maybe the only product type of this kind in the state, so, or the first in the state. So if you want to speak to that or kind of clarify that.
Yeah, well,
might
certainly. I
help.
mean, you know, part of the challenge with high density is not having any yard, which some people really love because you don't have to mow your lawn, which is great. But it's also nice to have some outdoor space. And so a majority of these units, all of the, or at least most of the Davidson homes, and I think all of the Wonderland homes have a really pretty large fourth floor deck that's going to be pretty spectacular with views of the mountains and, you know, barbecue area. Some of it's covered, some of it's uncovered. And I think it's going to provide a really unique product type here that's going to be very attractive to a lot of people.
I think the the materials, the textures, the colors, everything has really come together, but I think staff is right on, I think it was the Davidson product is the back side and the each of the sides definitely need to have an additional color. If I'm correct, that was the Davidson, that was just, looked like it was just the brown and one stone, but to have multicolor and then an additional stone, that would be, you know, help add to how fabulous, you know, something like that looks, and to wrap it all the way around.
Yeah, and I'd add to the sides that were shown with the one color that are the pretty simple sides. keep in mind that there's only 6 feet between that and the building next to it.
Mhm.
And so you know, you might see the first 4 or 5 feet back of that, but you're really not gonna see behind that much. And so, you know, when it comes down to, quite honestly, the cost for the builders and deciding whether to put more brick on the front or less brick on the front and more on the side where you're not gonna see it.
Right.
It makes sense to me to pull as much as you can off the side where it's not gonna be seen anyway and put it on the important, you know, front side.
Sure. Or at least just to wrap that corner to get
Yeah,
it around
yeah.
the side.
Totally agree with that, and maybe, you know, going a couple more feet back, so it
Mhm.
provides a little bit more, interest on the corner, absolutely.
Before you sit down, Bill, why don't we see if anybody else has any questions for our applicant? Okay. Guess you answered all our questions.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I don't know that we have anybody from the public here, but is there anyone in the audience who wishes to comment on the subject? If not, I think we can go ahead and close the public hearing. Phyllis, can you check me if, I think we covered all of that? Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Comments from the commission? Jason, you want to go first?
Sure. As I said, I think there's a couple of things that, once again, the presentation was perfect. A lot of information in there that really makes it easy for us as a group to understand the overall concept. As I said, materials, textures, colors, the setbacks, the entryways on all of the products, you know, really is going to be a unique setting, something that this town really, you know, will benefit from. I think that, you know, the plant selection of going with deciduous plants over your evergreen plants in such a dense environment is a good choice also, because it's going to allow more of the lighting during the winter months to penetrate the areas it needs. And from a safety standpoint, I think that's a very good idea. And that's all I have this week. Nice and short.
Jerry?
The amount of detail and attention that goes into these planning meetings and into the thoughtfulness of designing these
Jerry,
products.
can you get your mic on? I'm sorry.
Sorry. The details and the thoughtfulness that goes into the design and planning of these buildings, and all the way down from the lighting to the landscaping to the exterior construction to the height to the setbacks to everything. It's been looked over so many times. It's impeccable. I'm really impressed. I want to thank town staff for their detailed presentation and our friend in the back row there. And I'm very impressed. Thank you.
I'm from a condo community, and so my concern about parking and how things are wired and space for interaction of people on the property was the basis for my concern. But overall, I thought this was a tremendous presentation. I really like it a lot.
Anthony?
Absolutely. I like this product a lot, and what's been presented. I think the three choices that we have for these homes are great, and they really kind of fit with the ideas that we have when we came forward and began moving forward with this project. It's a little bit overwhelming simply because of the size of it. I mean, when you're looking at these three separate builders, but we're being asked to look at it as all one project and one big piece. And there are good things about each. Then there are some questions that we have about each as well. So, I mean, in that sense, it would have been nice to kind of have broken them out individually and say, let's look at this builder's product and how we can address the issues that came up, and so forth. But I mean, just looking at the topologies, the materials that are being used, and the thoughtfulness behind it, I agree. I think it's really good and would fit with our idea. There are a couple of concerns, and that I want to bring up. And first is, I think that staff has made some really good points and brought up some technical issues and some corrections that need to be made. And I just want to make sure that those don't get overlooked as we move forward with this. There were a number of things like, for example, you brought up the paint and maybe having some additional work there with brickwork on that facade or something like that added, so that it doesn't look like a plain painted side, regardless of how far, you know, apart the homes are. We still want a very quality product, and we want it to look good. So that's one thing. I'm still not very clear about need clarifications on certain portions of the outlots and how those relate to the utility easement. And if staff says that they're okay, if our public utilities people say that they're okay, that's fine. But there's still that question, I think, that we need to look at. And in terms of that, there's also the issue around the street being the width of the streets, and having that not be publicly maintained is kind of also a question that comes up for me. And what I'm hoping that we're not trying to do, and despite the great presentation that we got and all the information, I just don't want us to get to a point where we're trying to push more homes into a space than really we should. I mean, for me, that needs to be looked at. And I don't know. It's one of the things that keeps coming into my mind. And let's not put more homes there than the land allows, so to speak.
I think, from my standpoint, is it's a transition. That section is becoming the transitional piece from the town center, which is extremely dense, to something that's less dense, even though it looks like it's dense. It looks like it's extremely dense. I think that transition piece, and then on into more of the residential area, is a great transitional piece. And I also think that it was a lot to look at, you know, from 3 different builders. But the great thing is that we have 3 different builders who are going to work together, and it seems like they've worked together because, you know, you don't see everything kind of flows together, but they all have their own single element that makes them great. And I think that's a phenomenal job between the 3 of them. And I don't know if they worked together on it or if it just came out this way, but I think all 3 builders presented something with their own variation that's going to make an entire, you know, small block very good. And I think that's, you know, that's something that's a great transitional piece from the town center that will make a great, keep using the word transition, but makes a great transition.
Phyllis, did you have any comments?
I really don't have any specific comments. I do like the material blocks. That looks good. I too am concerned about the density, but if that's what we've approved, then, you know, as part of this development, then I'm okay with that. So I think it looks good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I just want to echo what everybody else has said. I think it was a home run job all the way around. You know, Stephen, great job with the presentation, and I want to echo what Jason said in particular about how all 3 builders seem to have worked really well together to come up with a really nice plan that seems to flow really well. I think it's very impressive that the Davidson people were able to, you know, to get more square footage within the parameters that we've offered up. That's not a small feat, I'm sure. And personally, I mean, I love the materials that you guys have chosen. The elevations look very nice, very classy, very timeless. The top floor open features, I think, are really gonna be a nice selling point for a lot of people. It's gonna be, I think, maybe something that will distinguish our community a little bit, so. I don't think you could have improved on it personally, so. Well, unless anybody else has any final comments, does anybody care to?
I wanted to make a comment about Commissioner Stewart's thoughts about the density. Stephen, is this too dense for this area?
I don't know that it's too dense. The density thing is somewhat tricky. You know, the products within, or the development in the core is likely going to be more dense, and the staff's recommendation clarifies that we think this is a reasonable transition area. The other piece with density that is, you know, we need it in order to make the core work. So you have to have a certain amount of people, you know, to make the retail spaces work. And this is I think staff's general perspective is this is a step in the right direction towards getting that density in order to make, you know, what comes first necessarily doesn't, I don't know that there's a science to it, but if this comes first, then I think the rest of those pieces within the town core will likely follow more than they would if this was, you know, significantly less dense than what they're proposing. So, and then the other thing is, you know, when we looked at this, and one of the reasons we require these context kind of maps now as part of the final development plans, we did it with the medical office building, we did it with Centerpoint as well. But maybe even more important here is to show the context of, you know, there's a Central Park that's proposed just east of Superior Drive, and then Village Green. It's a smaller park, but it's proposed just southwest. I do have a pointer, so I can help with that. Village Green would be just in this corner here. So they do have access to, you know, public spaces, and then there's public spaces proposed within the development as well, but their proximity to some of the planned and programmed parks also helps with that. But, you know, it's also a kind of a market-driven, and we defer to the developer to, you know, create a product that is going to be viable and sellable. And I'm pretty confident that what we see here today will achieve that. So I hope that helps. But I'm no expert on all of that. I'm just an opinion. So.
Thank you.
And then just one more thing before we move on. I keep coming back to also parking. And just wonder what would be the benefit of having permit parking there or reserved spaces for those homes along the street or portions of the street?
It's something we can look into. I mean, I'd probably want to consult with the Public Works Director, Alex Arenella, and I don't see him in attendance today. But it's something I could look into and kind of get some more feedback from him, you know, and be prepared to discuss with the town board if that's your recommendation. You know, in general, I think, you know, from a planning perspective, oftentimes we find that places are overparked. So, you know, and having 89 on-street residential spaces seems pretty sufficient for 117 units, you know, when you look at that kind of ratio. The only concern, you know, and suggestion we might have if we were to go to, you know, designated, you know, private parking spaces that would serve the needs of the Davidson homes along Superior Drive, is that some of those parking spaces along Superior Drive would also probably be used for that park access for the larger community. So maybe we didn't designate any along Superior Drive and instead designated them along, or designated fewer spaces along Superior Drive and designated more of the spaces along Village Greenway to the south, just to allow that public parking space to remain free or more open for the park amenity. But overall, I don't know that when you have a ratio of, you know, 24 requested and 89 provided, that a designation is merited, but Alex may have a stronger opinion or more knowledge on that. If not, we can look into it.
Good point, thank you.
Any final comments? Hearing none, does anybody care to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion
Commissioner Miller?
that the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior resolution number PC-8, Series 2016. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the Town of Superior recommending approval of the major subdivision final plats and final development plans for Superior Town Center, Lot 1, Blocks 13 and 25.
Okay, we have a motion. Can we have a second?
Could I add, as with the conditions
Yes.
as in the resolution?
As with the conditions that are in the resolution.
With that amendment, can we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Reese, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, staff announcements. Do we have any?
Yeah, the one main announcement is that we had a town board or a planning commission meeting scheduled for next Tuesday night. That meeting's been postponed. So sorry about gathering you all or having you committed, and then that meeting will be pushed out to August. I think August 2nd. We'll likely consider the town hall expansion. That was what was on the agenda for next week. We will meet the following Tuesday, which is the 21st, and that one is for the McCaslin roundabout FDP proposal. So that's what's on the horizon. As I mentioned earlier, I was going to introduce Gavin McMillan. I don't know if I mentioned his last name before, but we have another consultant, and as we have been quite busy, you'll probably see more of Gavin. So he helped a lot with this, and will probably help with town center proposals moving forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephen. Anything else? All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.